are actually just thickened bands of that water balloon. So really there's like this one big capsular ligament, and then there's thickened bands that we term the ulnar collateral or the carpadial collateral or the anterior talar fibular ligament. That's just thickened bands of the overall capsular ligament in these joints. So the elbow has two main joints that live in the apartment complex, but don't live in the same apartment. One is the literal elbow joint, uniaxial hinge, probably the easiest joint you're going to have in the body, in the fetal out of fetal flexion extension. Right? But the one that lives below it, that one's a little trickier. Radial ulnar joint. Look at that radial head, built like a clock, circular, round, and it literally is meant to wrap and unwrap itself about the ulna. Easy way to remember it. Radius, rotates. Radius rotates about the ulna. Most of the time, I can fix it and do some crazy stuff, but the point is that the radius is meant to roll like a clock and wrap itself around the ulna. You say, why do we need that? To reposition our hands for functional circular grip. Literally, to reposition where we need to put our hands in dexterous manners to do stuff. It's the biggest reason. A couple other really cool reasons that we'll get into down the road, but the biggest reason is so that I can literally put my hands in a 360-degree function. 360. I get about 180 from wrapping and unwrapping here, and then I get an extra 180 from rolling my shoulder internally. But it's the sum total of all, man. I can get a lot of cool work done when I can reposition my palm. In anatomical position, I am unwrapped. In other words, the radius and the ulna are both laying on their beds, their partners, and they're both face forward. When I have pronation, the act of going prone literally means the act of going face down. That makes sense? So if I go from looking forward to now the head of the radius, if I put some little eyes on there with the magenta marker, you'd see now the eyes are facing down, prone. Pronation, supine, supination, the act of going prone, the act of going supine. So you're really wrapping and unwrapping. Now, like I said earlier, it's impossible to rotate the head without the rest of the bone going along for the ride. So we have a proximal radial ulnar joint, we have a distal radial ulnar joint, but it's still the radial ulnar. It's the concept of the radius wrapping and unwrapping. Now, here's the easiest way to tell whether you're wrapped or you're unwrapped. Anatomical landmarks. Again, the fact that the wrist doesn't twist is a powerful tool for us to be able to figure out things. So the name of the game is, am I supine or am I prone? And that is not a global concept. That is a local concept. When we think of prone and supine from an athletic training perspective, we think of it as a global reference. I'm either looking at the ceiling or looking at the floor. But we have to remember, these are local concepts. This is looking forward relative to where you were in anatomical position. Or facing down relative to where you were in anatomical position. So in other words, I can be wrapped, but yet technically make it face up globally, but locally it's still face down. Yeah? Okay, you with me? And that's where people are going to get it confused, because when you just learn it with the soup bowl, that's all fine and dandy for that one analogy. But you use a global reference and you say, oh, when I'm supinated, the palm of my hand is facing the ceiling. Well, guess what? Here, I'm pronated and the palm of my hand is facing the ceiling. I'm wrapped. So using those global references isn't a sure thing, okay? So I'm going to give you more sure ways to see this, and that's anatomical landmarks. So because the wrist doesn't twist, it allows us to note that in anatomical position, my pinky is medial side, and my thumb is lateral side. If let's say, I represent and my wife represents has anybody had my wife in class? Okay. So my wife and I represent the right radio on the joint relationship, okay? If I wrap, and I'm the radius, okay? I'm the lateral. If I wrap my body around her and keep my head on my pillow, well, now my feet went to the inside. My feet went medial. So my point is that when you fully pronate, now your thumb is medial side. You brought the foot on the lateral part and wrapped it around to the medial. Pinky is now lateral and thumb is now medial. And when you're unwrapped, pinky will be medial and thumb will be lateral. That's an all the time. And that's because the wrist doesn't twist. Okay? So I do little silly moves like, okay, well, what position am I in? Well, let's check. Here's my pinky. Doop, 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 doop. This is the medial side of my arm. I must be unwrapped. Oh no, what's my position? Oh, it's confusing. Here's my thumb. Doop, 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 doop. Walk it down, man. What part is that? That's the medial side. I must be wrapped. Okay. There is a functional position. Guys, remember position is just anatomical, fetal. There is a functional position of the radioulnar joint called semi-pronated. And it's just a position that we do a lot of stuff with. We hold glasses of butterbeer and root beer with, and we use tools and we do certain things. It's a position we put ourselves in a lot of times, so it gives its own name. Why is that not called a semi-supinated position? Why do you think it's called a semi-pronated position? What you think? Why did we pick that one and not the other one? That seemed fair. Yeah, what's absolutely right. Because in anatomical position, we're supinated. We have to pronate to get there. If anatomical position was here, we'd be calling it a semi-supinated position. Well done. Okay. I think I pulled something. Great. So once again, names of things make sense if you give it. Did I ever tell y'all why I say that? When I think I was in high school, when I went to visit my great aunt at the old folks home. I know that's not correct, but that's what we called it back in the day. You know, we called it the old folks home. It's a nursing home. And that for people out of town, Dawn is aunt. And we were watching TV. We'd always watch TV, and she was blonde, and she couldn't hear very well, but we watched TV together. Hey, Brian, you still here? Yes, ma'am, Tante, I'm here. And this lady rolled up her wheelchair right next to Tante, and I was like, ma'am, do you want to watch something else? Now, I might have been like 12, 13 years old, and she did, and I freaked out, dude. And I was just like, oh, I gotta go. And I was just like, oh my God. And then I felt so bad. And then I know she's probably dead by now. So I just, to let her know that I love her, and that I think of her every now and then, I'll bring back her memory by just going, It's a true story. All right. So, here we go. Wrapping and unwrapping. That's the game, man. Who likes to wrap Christmas presents? Some people find it therapeutic. Okay? Wrapping, unwrapping. That's the name of the game for the radioulnar joint. Am I wrapping myself or am I unwrapping myself? And you don't have to full wrap. It could just be a little wrap. Am I in the process of wrapping myself around the ulnar or not? Does that make sense? Am I wrapped? Am I unwrapped? Am I semi-wrapped? That's how I want you to think of this. And again, the reason we have it, so that we can do a lot of stuff with our hands. Repositioning of our hands. Functional circle of grip. Okay? Right radioulnar joint pronation. Right radioulnar joint supination. Right radioulnar joint pronation. Right radioulnar joint supination. Does my radioulnar joint, now that you know, have anything to do with my wrist in terms of motion?
No.
In terms of functional tasks, they may work together. They may team up to do stuff, but they are totally independent. So watch what happens when I flex my wrist. I wrap and I unwrap. But it may look different, but it's not. Because my radioulnar joint doesn't care about what my wrist is doing. Just because it might look different. So note on the test, that's why you can't use these global concepts. This is pronation just as much as this is pronation. But one, I ended with my fingers pointing towards you guys, and the other, I ended with my fingers pointing away. The radioulnar joint doesn't care about that. It's just, am I wrapping myself over my partner, or am I unwrapping myself? So on the test, I'm going to give you some stuff like this. Or, but by that time, you're going to have enough clues to be able to figure it out. Okay? All right, practical question. If you're driving home from class and your hands are on the wheel, and let's say you're not here, you're here, okay, on the sides, and you need to make a left, let's say a right, you're going to turn right, and you're going to keep both hands on the wheel, and you do this. Do you realize if your radioulnar joints weren't able to move, you wouldn't be able to do that? Like just think of those simple tasks that if your radioulnar joint weren't able to move, your hands would do this. But because my left radioulnar joint was able to wrap, and my right radioulnar joint was able to unwrap, I was able to keep my grip on the wheel. It's just an example of some practical things that you can do by wrapping and unwrapping. Where are my softball players at? High school? Doesn't matter. What about baseball? Where are my former baseball players at? You realize if you weren't able to move your radioulnar joints, it's wrapping and unwrapping, man. My left unwraps and my right wraps. Now, again, just trying to show you some practical usage of wrapping and unwrapping. Okay? Put your hands over your head. Right hand touching your head. Okay? Simon didn't say. Just joking. Okay. Now what I'd like for you to do is go from the palm of your hand touching your head to the palm of your head touching the ceiling. Don't answer it out loud. Think about it. What did your radioulnar joint do? Don't answer it out loud. Think about it, and then I will allow you to discuss with your neighbor to see if you'll get the same answer. You go from your palm facing the ground to your palm facing the ceiling. I gave you global clues, but does the radioulnar joint move from a global reference? No, it moves from a local reference. That's why we can't use things like, when it's facing here, when it's facing there. That could get us into trouble. Okay? Discuss it with your neighbor and see if y'all get the